Hello, everyone, and welcome to the launch day event for Patricia Cornwell and LIVID, her new Scarpetta novel. If you haven't already run out and bought your copy, there are signed copies available through the booksellers for tonight's virtual event. Both Watermark and Anderson's have signed copies, and you can find links to buy those editions on the homepage screen for this event. So afterwards, if you're looking to buy more copies for your family and your friends leading into the holidays, this is your perfect opportunity. We're also dropping into the chat function on the side links to both of those event pages for the booksellers. So feel free to buy your copies. Thank you for joining. On behalf of Grand Central Publishing, we are thrilled to be publishing LIVID. And to have Patricia Cornwell here with us tonight with Jamie Lee Curtis. Patricia is the author of over 25 different books in the Scarpetta series, and this is her newest. And I'm really thrilled to have Jamie Lee Curtis here joining us to discuss this great book with Patricia. I will be jumping back on in about 30 minutes to moderate the Q&A. So if you see down at the bottom the Ask a Question function, please feel free to drop in a question there, and I will make sure to read it out loud, as many as we have time for. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Jamie Lee Curtis and Patricia Cornwell.
Well, hi, everybody. It's so fun to be talking to people all around the world about my friend Patricia's new fabulous book, LIVID. Now, I'm just going to school our friend who just did our introductions because he did it like this, where you get the reflection, but you see if he tips it down, because I've been to book selling things before, and you want to tip it down a little so you get no reflection. Very excited to be here to talk about this newest work, which is a very scary book. In a way, this scared me more than any of the other books, and I know you know why, Patricia, and I'm sure our viewers, our watchers, our participants here are going to agree with me. Why is AI so interesting to you?
Well, I mean, why don't you ask a small question? Like, what's quantum physics about? Well, AI is interesting to me because it makes me question everything. I mean, if we can create intelligence that can then become smarter than we are and can solve its own problems, and patch its programming and continue to do that, what does that say about any of us and what we are? And I've heard these stories about people who have been working with artificial intelligence, and something they're working on seems to become sentient, and will say, I don't want to be deleted. Please don't do this to me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a crazy world we're getting in. It all goes back to one thing for me. We shouldn't be so smug about what we think reality is. I think that there's a lot that we just don't know.
Yeah, well, you've obviously brought a lot that we don't know to us. I think we've kind of, as you've explored forensics and you've explored new technologies, we've learned them along with you, as, by the way, every single crime procedural should be sending you checks. I'm sure they're not. They should all be sending you checks, because we've become crime solvers because of the very technology you introduced us all to. You introduced this world that then everybody replicated. And how does that feel? Is that a good feeling? Do you feel, is that a shitty feeling?
If you want me to be really honest, and I know you do, and for a long time, it was not a good feeling. Yeah. I felt like the train had left the station without me. I mean, our mutual friend, Billie Jean King, right about the time CSI got started, she said, oh, you got to watch this show. I love it so much. And I don't really watch any of these things. And that's kind of like, when someone said, oh, there's this little company called Amazon, but we're not worried about them. And you go, whoa, that's a shot heard around the world later on, because things become so big. But I've always felt disappointed that my work wasn't translated into that medium. But the way I feel about it now is, my friend Marcella Fierro, who was the chief medical examiner I learned so much from, she said to me one time, you made forensics accessible to people. Mm-hmm. And that's all I've done. Mm-hmm. And is I've made it accessible. And the truth is, it takes more than one person. It takes a village. And so if I am indirectly helping teach people how to, quote, solve their own crime, so to speak, or to be better at noticing what's going on in the world, just like you tilt in the book a certain way. That's good engineering. Notice what's around you. If I'm helping with that, then I try to have an attitude that that's my part and I'm trying to do it well.
Well, and you've done it also through, and it's interesting, I got this book on my movie tour, a strong female character. You have done all of that teaching through the voice of one Kay Scarpetta. And by giving her that voice, by having her be our teacher, her be our partner, her be our sister, her be our friend, her be our boss, her be all of the things that she is and continues to be throughout all of these books, you gave us somebody to hold on to. I want you to talk about Kay. I want you to talk a little bit about Kay, both just inherently as a character and how she has evolved for these books, because the current crop of books, starting with Autopsy, Kay has returned to the job of chief medical examiner. She she left that job, and now the last two books take place modern day with Kay Scarpetta coming back. So talk a little bit about Kay as the sort of portal that we have all gone into with and learned all this stuff. And then tell me a little bit about, it's a long question, tell me kind of like where she is now and why she's back and how she's changed.
Well, I'll start with the last question, is why she's back. She's back for the same reason I'm back, I think, which is, when I stopped writing about it and wasn't going to do it anymore, and then I did the Captain Chase books, and then the pandemic started, and you and I were talking about other things, and that's when we started talking about Scarpetta for TV, which made me think, well, maybe there's another book in there too, but the world needs heroes more now than ever. And I can say that about her because she's not me. What she is the combination of what I would have wanted to have show up on my doorstep when I was a little kid and needed somebody strong, somebody like you who show up and say, get the hell out of the way, I'm taking charge here. It's that, and also I look at myself and all the flaws that I have and things that I could do better. And with her, she's my way of trying to learn to do things better, to be more highly evolved. And I've learned, as she has over the years, because times change and everything changes. And we have to change with it. And I say we, because I have to change, she has to change. And that's why I write about the things that are going on right now. I might put it in a spooky environment and scare your socks off while I'm doing it, but I'm also telling you, this is the world. It's not just what you can see that will get you, it's what you can't see that you really better be scared of.
Well, we're going to get there. We're going to talk about that. Tell me about Kay, just for the uninformed. I mean, I'm sure there's not one of the 890 people who are in this chat with us. There's probably not one 891, maybe that one person who just jumped in doesn't really know the sort of DNA of Kay Scarpetta.
That's the person who thinks they're at Scarpetta restaurant, and I don't blame them.
What is the DNA of Scarpetta?
The DNA of Scarpetta is somebody who landed on this planet, never really felt like she belonged anywhere that she lived, because she just, she was Italian, and then she was, from a part of Florida, or part of the world where people might look down on her. She was very much smarter than the average bear, it can be a curse when you're coming along. I mean, I wouldn't know, but I tell that that's true. But she just has this tremendous empathy, and what really kind of set things off was her dealing with her father dying. And that loss and being faced with something that she would have done anything to change if she did have that power. And that has caused her to chase after the one thing she can't fix over and over and over again. And Benton Wesley would sit there and tell her that this is what she does. But something that might have been born out of maybe not the best of circumstances because of grief and loss and maybe fear, what she's done is turn it into her superpower.
Yeah.
Like Sherlock Holmes, baby. She can walk in a room and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. She knows what went on here.
Exactly. you said it before, which is the thing that's the worst enemy is the one you cannot see. Now, we've just all survived, many of us. Many of us have not. Many of us are still dealing with this pandemic, which was something we couldn't see. We all remember March 17th, when the government told us here in America to shut it down. And we all were just alone in our houses, washing the boxes that got delivered, searching for toilet paper, singing happy birthday as we washed our hands. We didn't know it was airborne. We didn't know so much about, and we were terrified. It shut the world down, a unseen virus. Now, I remember hearing about the Havana syndrome. I remember hearing about the embassies in Havana and all these people becoming very ill. And I remember hearing about the possibility that it was radio waves, it was microwave technology. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but this book deals with a lot of unseen warfare, unseen weaponry, unseen bad guys, unseen evil. Talk to me about the unseen.
Well, the funny thing is, we think it's so new, but the idea of the unseen enemy really isn't. I mean, think of the Salem witch trials. Those people were prosecuted based on the unseen, the invisible world, and these spooky things that supposedly were happening, miracles and religious events and all these things that we don't see or we can't understand. This is not really that new. And, even the Bible, I love to quote the Bible because everybody knows I'm such a sinner and I should be quoting it. It says, we war not against principalities, but powers of darkness. It's basically, it's almost like you're dealing with energy out there, not something physical, but principalities and powers of darkness. To me, we are dealing, and you think about it, you can walk into a room and you feel something sometimes that tells you to walk out of that room. We all have an antenna, so to speak, and we're picking up on stuff. But to weaponize this and to create the sorts of things, and it's not just what happened in Havana. I mean, this has been happening all over the world, these attacks, including on our own nation's capital, where somebody can be walking to their car and they find themselves on the pavement and they think they've had a stroke. And that's not what it was. Mostly this is vehicles that will pull up and have these microwave weapons. But unfortunately, as I point out in my book, people are making these in their homes and they're getting smaller. And it's predicted there will be a day when you'll be wearing that on your belt like a phaser out of Star Trek, which is a dreadful thought. So, but we've always, one of the most dangerous unseen enemies that we've always dealt with throughout history, and we certainly are dealing with it today, is misinformation. You can't really see lies. You can't see the intentionality behind them and the manipulations that are being used against us.
One of my favorite lines in the book is where you say spying and lying are the same thing. I remember Joni Mitchell laughing and crying, it's the same release. Lying and spying are the same thing. That scared me when I
was justified. I'm doing it for patriotic reasons. Of course, I just got my mouth washed out with ivory soap when I was a little kid. If I came up with my excuse for lying, but seriously, the invisible, especially with social media, because we don't know who we're talking to. I mean, I met the lovely comedian Jennifer Saunders. We met on social media years ago. We ended up meeting at a hotel and having lunch in London. And when we both walked in, I said, this is when we say to each other, we're not who you thought we were.
Yeah.
How do you know, right? So we are living in very unusual times where all that's concerned, and we need to be careful, be judicious, be smart, and don't get too wound up emotionally about things that you see till you know what's really true.
I was listening to NPR today or yesterday, and I think there may be a new documentary about TikTok, and the statistic that was said today, and I'm going to misquote it, so don't hate me, was that if a child goes on TikTok at age 10, by the time they're 18 years old, the AI, the algorithm, knows more about that person than anybody in their family, any of their friends, that the amount of information we give out that we think is innocuous and isn't weaponizing can be because of the amount of information we've shared through these technologies.
Well,
that's weird. That I thought if I was the parent of a 10-year-old who wanted TikTok, I wouldn't give them TikTok. Thank you.
It's happening with everything, and there's no way it's not stoppable. I mean, people I know who are cyber investigators, they spend most of their time on open source. It's not classified. It is all the stuff that we're doing all day long that tell people where you are, who you are, what you're doing. Now, the scary part is the kind of stuff that I Google. Oh my God, I'm waiting for a knock on the door.
Yes, well, I mean, and I'm surprised they haven't.
Yeah, and that is what's really scary, because the parameters can add up to the wrong thing. But I've given up worrying about some of it. I mean, you can't, unless you just absolutely unplug yourself from the whole world and don't really exist anymore. There's a record of you everywhere. They can freaking see you from outer space. I mean, there's satellites that can pick up pretty small things on the ground, including us. Yeah. So that's why we have so many scenes where it just is conveniently rainy and cloudy when Scarpetta's heading to the scene. In addition to the drama of weather, I know those bloody satellites didn't see anything. If they see too much, then how do there comes a point when there's so much that can be solved and witnessed and found out that as a crime writer, I am often kind of stymied of how do you get something that people say, well, somebody would have seen that on camera, or that would have been, it's a challenge.
Well, yes. Let's talk about you being a crime writer. The center of these books are crimes. Now, I've recently written a screenplay, and there's a really gruesome scene that I'm not going to explain here, but I'm not that person. I'm not drawn to those kind of things, but my imagination is wild. And so I added the scene, and I've had people read it and be like, oh, Jamie, what? It involves a scissor lift.
Oh, God.
That's all I'm saying. But my question to you is, I know you, but you're also deeply fascinated. Your study of Ripper, your fascination with the macabre, the way human beings hurt other human beings, and the methods. And so how much of this is something in your head at all times? Like the middle of dinner with Stacy as you're cutting a steak, does your mind go to, oh, that looks like
my mind goes a lot of places. I sure wish it wouldn't. Because I've seen too much, and I can imagine too much, and it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, if it were not real, then I would say I wish I'd never witnessed any of this. But it is real, and these things happen, and because they happen, I feel I feel a little bit like Scarpetta does, which is I can't avert my gaze from that. Somebody's got to look. Somebody's got to pick up the pieces here, she says as she's walking along the railroad tracks, and she means it literally. Somebody has to do that. And so I just think, but I'm not by nature, I'm not the first, I don't go through haunted houses. Yeah. The last time I went through one, which was in the mid-90s in Virginia Beach, and I hadn't been to one since spooky things as a kid. I had no idea they're doing the kind of stuff that you do. You do all your knives and everything. And I walk in and someone starts chasing me with a fake chainsaw, and I had a knee brace on because I'd had knee surgery, saying, oh, I love them when they're wounded and have, can't run very fast. Well, I ended up chasing him because I got so upset. And I was there with a cop friend of mine, and she led me out. She says, we're not doing that again.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, I also do know that you have a lot of cop friends. You have cop friends, you have FBI friends. You are the resource. You're like the deepest dive. You're the human Rolodex for all things forensic, police. I mean, all of it.
I'm just
cultivate this.
nothing more than a police reporter. I'm just a police reporter. I mean, when I was one at the Charlotte Observer, they called it Cop Shop, and that was, what I did. And I feel like in some ways I still do, because whether it's the Secret Service or the FBI or local law enforcement, CIA, whoever it might be, I usually end up meeting people, and I want to know what they do. And you always find out, like, how many people know that the Secret Service, that they are the stewards of our nation's financial system. That's why it was created. The very day that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, he created the Secret Service to fight the counterfeiting, because it was ruining the nation. And so after the bad night at the theater, they decided they should also do special protection, which is how they got into that. But people don't know that we have law enforcement they're into cyberspace. They are dealing with robotics. They're dealing with satellites. It isn't just chasing, a big limousine down the road in the middle of Washington. So I try to know what these people do, and that's also where I get my story ideas. Because if I know what they're up against, then that's what Scarpetta's going to be up against.
So I'm going to end my time with you, because we're at 20 minutes, because someone is a professional and timed it. I'm going to end with a big question and let the audience hear your response, because you just talked about stories. So how is storytelling now different from when you began writing about Case Scarpetta, and why does storytelling even matter? What does storytelling do for us as a society?
Well, without stories, we would be in the vacuum of deep, dark space. We would not be able to feel the walls. We wouldn't know who we are or who we can be or why anything, or how to act. Even religious things are stories that are told to teach people to act in certain ways. They are our blueprint for our pilgrimage through the universe. That's what stories are. And they're important no matter how they're told. When I was starting out, there was a much more decided way that you would tell, write a novel. I mean, I'm still trying to learn how to do that, by the way, but I hear there's decided ways to write a novel. And when I was starting out, the kind of book that I wrote then, I would not write today, because our attention span is different. And just as the Victorian critic Walter Pater said that all art aspires to the condition of music, I feel that if you go the layers above, kind of right up there where music is, it's the visual. You want to hear it, you want to see it, and the words get in the way. And so as I try to evolve as an artist, I want fewer words and more of a transparent journey into that immediate sensation of being in a helicopter, or even walking in the morgue and experiencing it, but not having it traumatize you. Learn from it and feel it, but not have it be disgusting like I've seen it.
The flow of your books, what I love about them is that you open the book, you jump in the boat, and then for the chapter after chapter, you get swept up. It's the books drive themselves. They're this beautiful, beautiful pattern that you've created in your writing. And every time I go on such a journey, I meet so many people I never thought I would meet. In this new book, I've met many new characters that I feel like I know really well.
That's going to be fun for people, because they're going to find out more about what it was like when Scarpetta was in law school, and where she lived, and who her roommate was, who now conveniently is a judge in a trial that's very important. So, and that is fun. But thank you for saying all that. And let me just say, because it's important that everybody hears this, and I would imagine the same is true when you're doing a movie or something. That people don't realize there's a tremendous amount that goes under the hood. And when I'm sitting at my desk, I don't just spin these things off effortlessly. In fact, I wouldn't even want you to see some of my early attempts at it. That's why I'd often tweet, you can't be good at anything unless you're willing to be bad at it first.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like putting clay on the wheel. It's like carving something. It's like painting a mural that you go little brush strokes at a time, and then you go back and you fix it, and then you do it again, and then you fix it, and then God help you, somehow you get there.
Well, I more than get there. I do agree. It's fun to hear early stuff because Scarpetta has been around for a long time. We get to learn new things about her, new characters in her life.
I learn them too. She doesn't
Yeah.
tell me squat. She doesn't tell me crap. That difficult woman. No, so then I find out, oh, you had a roommate in law school. Why didn't you tell me that 30 years ago? I could have written something.
We needed that character in this current.
By the way, I know that person.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's fun. I mean, if she didn't keep evolving, I'd be bored too. And I don't want any of us to be bored.
Yeah, there's a death that's associated with the judge, and it's this sort of shocking world that we enter, and that's where Lucy shows up, and the team kind of shows up, and it's so interesting to see the multi-layers of law enforcement and what the FBI thing, and it's fascinating to me. And there's a lot of that in this book. There's a lot of people stepping on each other's toes, trying to keep information. But there's also some very personal stuff, some beautifully assigned character traits. I really think it's your secret sauce is that the specificity within your characters, of their foibles, of their, I mean, what we learn about this woman who's in this house who has died. By the way, people, somebody dies.
Yeah.
We say who, but there is a death in the book, Livid, published today. How does it feel to have a book published today? You've been publishing for a long time. How does that feel to have this book published?
It's a combination of sort of a sense of wonder,
Yeah.
and also a little bit of fear, because I never know what's going to happen. I honestly do want people to like what I do. I know, Henry Irving said to the audience once at the Lyceum Theater back in the Victorian era, if you don't applaud, I can't act. And if nobody wants to read what you write, you can't write. So, you want people to want what you do.
There are 900 people in our little group who I know want to ask you questions, who I know both not only want to support your work, but are enthralled by this work. As you know, the writer of the TV series that we're making of Scarpetta, the way she communicated, when she moved to California, the way she communicated with her mother was that they would read your most current Scarpetta book. Simultaneously, they would read them. And then whenever they would speak, they would say, okay, how far into the book are you? Oh my God, did you see the ba, 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 ba? And that must feel amazing, that there are generations in families who've read your work and love Kay and love you and Kay and the whole family, really.
Very humbling. It's very, very humbling. And I think I learned a long time ago, I don't know if this makes any sense. I remember somebody once said to me, don't you ever get excited anymore? And I said, the problem is I can't. It's like, it's like my bottle explodes. We're shaken up with carbonated water in it. And so I learned a long time ago just to, and like when I'm flying the helicopter, it's the same thing. I just go flatline almost, just real steady. Everybody else is worried about going flatline too, just for the record. But I learned not to get too excited, because I will. I remember in the early days when I would roll up at a book signing in Richmond, and oh my God, I mean, one time the line was literally around the entire shopping mall. People have been sitting there for 8 hours, and I arrived, and when I saw all these people, I could hardly talk. I was about to cry. Yeah. I would almost burst into tears, because I mean, this is somebody who I couldn't get published. I figured, I knew that I had a knack. I used to scare everybody to death when I tell stories as a little kid. That's why I was everybody's favorite babysitter, because I would scare them with my stories and make them cry. But
I'm glad I didn't end up in any of the Halloween movie babysitting jobs, because it doesn't end well. It ends where you're on the opposite side of Scarpetta. You're on the slab with the bright light on you, rather than standing over it going like, look, she ate peas for lunch, but she was allergic to peas, and whatever the other. I know people want to ask questions, and it's already way past our time. There you are.
I'm here.
I'm timing myself to come up with the perfect question right at the moment, and I'm like, but it's like 30 minutes.
You're perfect. You're right on time,
of course,
Jamie.
you've got a timer. Of course, she has a timer.
Well, because that's how this works.
I'm also
bring
practicing.
in the questions. Now you tip it forward.
I got it better.
Tip it forward.
See?
Not like this. Tip it forward.
Every time.
There you go.
All right.
Now it doesn't.
You taught me. I appreciate it.
There it is.
So the first question, you guys have already hinted at this, but there's a couple of questions about the Scarpetta project making it into production. And will we see a Hitchcock-like cameo in any of the scenes from either of you?
Wow.
Turn that over to the producer.
Yeah. So we are actively in the process of developing, selling, packaging, creating Scarpetta through my company Blumhouse, Jason Blum and his partners. And we are very excited about it. And we are right at the precipice of big decisions, big announcements. So we are close, but I'm not at liberty. I can only speak for Patricia. Of course, Patricia will make a Hitchcockian appearance. As for me, God knows. I could be in it. I could be around it. Who knows? So we're close. We will have an announcement very soon. I wish I had had an announcement for today for the 907 people who would get a scoop. But we're close, and it's very exciting.
I will also say that the Hitchcock, a cameo sounds good because you only have to do it in like silhouette, maybe. Just I look better in shadow more and more as time goes by. Anyway.
There's a lot of questions about what you're working on next, Patricia. Will your next book be in the Scarpetta series?
She has. I've started a new story, and she has not walked off the job yet. So I think this is going to be a very creepy, really creepy story, scary. And again, dealing with something highly technical that we're not used to, but it wears the trappings of monsters and things that go bang in the night. So yes, I am working on the next one, and I'm kind of excited about it. I've already been doing some research to some strange areas. Anyway.
That was actually the next question. What was your favorite destination for research for this series, or for the next, maybe just a research place that you really enjoy?
Wow, there's so many research places I've enjoyed. Listen, the Secret Service training facility is really fun because they put me, oh, Jamie, you have to do this. They put you on the car track in the Dodge Charger, going all over the place. And these people drive like you've never seen. They make the Dukes of Hazzard look like wimps. And probably nobody knows who that is anymore.
We all know.
Yeah. And by the way, they have the Dukes of Hazzard Museum up in the Blue Ridge Mountains where I was up recently too. So I'm hanging out in a lot of Merino kind of places, it seems like these days. But again, you go out and try to find a story until it finds you.
On that note, how long does it typically take to write your novels, including the research process?
I spend a year on each book. And it's really pretty much all I do. And it's as people around me will attest to, this takes up most of my time.
There's an interesting two-part question here. Which book was the hardest to write, and which book was your favorite to write?
Wow. Well, the hardest to write probably was postmortem, because that was the first, and it was, I was really living the real cases that had happened in Richmond. That I was inspired by serial killings that began to happen while I was working at the medical examiner's office, and I was absolutely terrified. I lived alone. I'd gotten separated, getting divorced, and in this little apartment, and I would come home, and it was when I bought my first gun. I went and took shooting lessons. I put a lock on the bedroom door because nobody knew who was doing this. They didn't know if it was someone that worked at the medical school where we all were. And so when I finally got around to writing, saying, what would Scarpetta do if this were happening? And I can remember one thing very specifically, and if Dr. Fierro's listening to this, she'll forgive me for telling it. She probably doesn't even remember it. But she was the medical examiner on those cases in Richmond. And she was under like pressure you've never seen. I mean, getting dragged out in the middle of the night for another one of these horrific things. And she never said a word about it at work, but the case files are all taped up so nobody could get in them. And she started getting hives, occasionally. And I'm looking at her, Marcel, I love you, but this is true. And I'm thinking, you don't even know the stress you're under right now. You don't even know. And that's when I began to understand enough to be able to tell a story like that of somebody new in a city and this is under siege by some killer that's talk about the invisible, climbing through somebody's window, leaving almost without a trace, except for a strange odor and some other things. So that was probably the hardest, and maybe it was the most satisfying too, because I finally felt I found her voice in that book.
There's a lot of questions about the various characters that are in the Scarpetta series. One asks, are there similarities between yourself in both Scarpetta and Lucy, and which character do you most closely identify with?
Weirdly enough, I identify with Marino a lot. People do not know what a slob I can be, and I have a potty mouth, and sometimes I do things just as gauche and stupid as he does, and that's one of the reasons I enjoy him. I think is because I relate to the sort of very subtle humor about laughing at ourselves. Marino gives us a chance to laugh at ourselves, and I like that about him. Lucy, I relate to her the least, I think, in many ways. That might surprise people. It seems like we do a lot of the same things, but I simply learned to do them so I could write about them, and I'll never be as good at them as she is, no matter what it is, riding a motorcycle, shooting a gun, or flying a helicopter. I have a funny feeling if I met her, she might make me feel that way too, which is strange to say. Scarpetta, you'd want to sit next to her on a plane. If you didn't feel good, she'd probably fix it. And she wouldn't be mean to you, even if she didn't want to chat. She'd put in her earplugs and pretend it's plugged into something, and then make you shut up that way.
So a little bit of a different tone for this question. Which one of your experiences was the scariest or most exciting that you did when researching for Kay? Was it scuba diving, flying the helicopter, etc.?
Scuba diving. Every cell in my body says do not inhale underwater. Every cell in my body says fly, float. You shouldn't be held by gravity. But to this day, if I go scuba diving, I have to go through certain little rituals because I get really anxious. My heart starts racing. And so what I do is I go and I send the dive master down, my dive master, because I always have one with me. And I go in and go down before anybody else, because if I float around on the surface, I have too much time to think about it. Mm-hmm. And flying, I don't get scared. Everyone else might, but I don't. So I love helicopters.
A question about Kay again. Did her character develop from someone you knew early in your career specifically, or was she a combination of different people?
She's a combination of people, and oddly enough, I will meet people who remind me of her, even though I didn't know them at the time. Jamie, you're one of those people. You remind me of her. Ruth Graham there's some qualities there that had nothing to do with religion in terms of this very beautiful energy who was strong and fearless and who rescued people. That was my friend Ruth. And then you add to that the scalpel smart, sharp Dr. Fierro, who was the chief medical examiner of Virginia, who kind of taught me everything I know. And I learned the art of forensic medicine from her, because she didn't just go by what you're taught to do. She would use her deductive abilities, and she would figure out some way to test something, and she'd come up with an answer nobody else would have, and totally change the case into something else because of she bothered. And that's the thing about Scarpetta, and it's true in Livid. There's always that one detail that she is going to bird dog down, and she can't rest until she does. And in Livid, she was going to go through that poor doctor's notebooks, the one who that she had to testify on his behalf because he committed suicide. And she doesn't need to go. She doesn't need to find out anything else to do what she's done her job by the time she gets to that. But she's going to go because that's who she is. And that's always what saves the day and just about gets her killed every damn time.
There are a lot of questions about Sherlock Holmes and detectives in that. Have you been inspired by classical mysteries? And was that something that you grew up reading as a child?
I beg to confess that I did not. I read books on archaeology, and mostly I was banging a tennis ball against a backboard and running away from my brothers and doing other things. But Conan Doyle, I find very inspiring because this is a doctor. He experimented with things. He opened his mind up. He was friends with Houdini until he wasn't anymore. He was curious about magic. He was curious about the paranormal. He was part of the ghost hunters because he believed there was more to this world than meets the eye, and he wanted to have the answers. And I think what he did was absolutely remarkable. And he's somebody I would have loved to have met.
A little bit of a craft question for you. Any advice for a debut novelist?
Well, yes. First of all, put on your Kevlar, baby. It's rough out there. But most of all, you must believe in what you're doing. And you must figure out what you're curious about. What are you interested in? Because if you're not interested in it, I'm not either. And if you're just making yourself be interested in it because you think nobody else has written about it before, well, that may not be a good reason either. What moves you? And when something moves you, then go out and find the source of it. Get as close to it as you can, safely and practically. And I'm not talking about doing evil things. I don't believe in researching. If you want to be a murderer, you can go talk to someone else. I'm not going to help you with that. But it's storytelling is a very humbling experience because it's not really our idea. We may think it is, but we are compelled and bound to find something that sort of wants to light on our shoulder and have us give it voice. And it doesn't always cooperate the way we want. And it's a strange thing, and it really does require a willingness. I won't say work as much as I will say a willingness. And you must let it be what it wants and not try to turn it into what you think it should be. But don't give up. If you are a writer, you will find a way to sing that song because it's the one you know, and it's the one you'll do the best. I should say storyteller. It isn't necessarily a writer anymore. It's a storyteller.
I have a couple of questions that I'm going to merge into one final question for you, and it's very appropriate considering Halloween being around the corner and who your moderator is tonight. You write some very scary scenes. What is the scariest thing you've ever experienced? And there's another question about, do you get bad dreams from some of the scenes that you write, or do you sleep well at night when you're writing?
Well, I think one of the scariest things for me is the few times I've done a cameo where I actually have dialogue. And I'm fine ad lib. In fact, I'll bore the legs off a piano rattling on. But if you give me script, unlike Jamie, I don't sleep for nights. I practice one line 1,000 times. When I had my one little line in Criminal Minds, and Matthew Gray Gubler afterwards, he said, I said, I did it in one take. I didn't waste your time. I said, I was so afraid of getting it wrong. He said, how can you effing get it wrong? You're playing yourself. I was playing myself at a book signing. And so I was still worried about getting it wrong. So, oh my God, that gives, I would get real stage fright doing stuff like that. That scares me worse than walking in the morgue. I don't know what scares Jamie. Probably nothing. I've been around you. You don't scare you. You're pretty fearless.
I'm fearless, except we have a lot of things that are scary right now.
Yeah, we do.
A lot of things that are pretty scary right now.
Well, you know, as hard as it is to face, one has to look at history and never think things can't repeat themselves. And we right now better fight for our democracy. And it's not about believing in this or that or what you agree with. It's about, do you want democracy or not? And I do. The alternative is unthinkable, and it won't. And by the way, if you're not in the group that they would get rid of, don't worry, you will be soon enough, because that's the way these things work. So I'm scared of these things and the destiny of our planet if we have nuclear weapons and other things. But I am holding out the hope that somehow we're going to get through this all right and evolve to a higher place and be better than we were. I hope so.
It's a lovely note to end on. Thank you both so much. I'm so excited for this. I'm going to be working on my downward positioning from now on. But thank you both for taking the time, and thank you to all of the attendees and the booksellers. Happy Publication Day, Patricia.
Yes, happy book birthday, Patricia.
Thank you for spending it with me, Jamie. You're my favorite. And thank you everybody for being here. Love all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
You all.
Stay safe. Happy Halloween.